Mr. Chairman, members, my name is John Henneberger. I'm the co-director of the Texas Low-Income Housing Information Service, and for about the last 25 years I've been a housing advocate in the state of Texas. I'm here today to talk about two things. One is cost savings that the state of Texas can achieve in housing and homeless programs, and the other is disaster recovery. First of all, with regard to cost savings, I too support the continued funding of the homeless funds, the $20 million of homeless funds, which were made available last year. I visited these facilities. I've seen on the ground that they put people back to work, they put people back in housing, they keep people out of emergency rooms, they keep people out of the jails and the public systems. They regularize people back into society and lower their burdens, the burdens of cost on the Medicaid system and other systems as well. I also support the continued funding of the Housing Trust Fund for the same reason, essentially. The Bootstrap Housing Program, while small, is a shining example of an opportunity to solve a housing problem systemically and not to force people to remain dependent upon continuing government housing subsidies. It's a program that challenges Texans to do for themselves, to build a home for themselves. And it's worked. As Mr. Gerber said, it's produced 1,000 homes. Now that's 1,000 families in Texas who own a home, who pay property taxes, and who aren't taking a HUD Section 8 voucher. And that's a genuine cost savings and a source of dignity. And if we don't maintain programs like that, if we don't have lifelines that help the homeless get off the streets and back in society, if we don't have programs, even though small, like the Bootstrap program, that gives people a path out of poverty and into joining society as taxpayers, then we fundamentally failed. And to eliminate those programs, to eliminate the progress that we've had, would eliminate the infrastructure that's been set up in these communities to provide these homeless services, and would eliminate the infrastructure of nonprofit communities doing the Bootstrap program. Because for those two reasons, I support the Housing Trust Fund and the continued fund for the $20 million of the homeless money. With regards to disaster recovery, I am one of the complainants who's been discussed regarding my organization is regarding the conciliation agreement of the state of Texas. I stand ready to brief any member of this committee. I stand ready to answer questions before you today. We've had the opportunity to discuss this with the chairman's staff and the committee staff over the course of the development of the conciliation agreement. I have a radically different view and opinion about the effect of the conciliation agreement on the disaster recovery program. I have deep concerns about the progress and the rate of expenditure. I have a profound concern about the proposal to eliminate the state's role in administering disaster recovery funds by completely privatizing this program in a private corporation, a private consulting corporation, and the proposal to eliminate the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs and combine it with a private nonprofit corporation. These programs require legislative oversight and direct accountability. The programs, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John, of the 25 years you've been involved, I think I've known you 24 of those years, and it's been an honor working with you. Talk about hearts. And I know you were struck ill not too long ago, but you kept on working from your bed on these issues. Do you believe there's a need for a revenue funding source, for the Housing Trust Fund to lower the dependency of the general revenue?
Yes, sir. The flexibility of the state funds, as you've heard testified by both the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs and the Texas Department of Rural Affairs, is the key element which allows the state to innovate and make progress in these programs. And the small commitment of funds, the $30 million of funds that are proposed to be eliminated here, is in essence the state's investment in solving problems and providing people opportunity to get out of poverty. And without if we depend solely on federal funds, first of all, there's not enough federal funds. And secondly, the federal funds are encumbered with more difficult approaches. And neither of these programs would have worked without the state funding commitment.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Henneberger, am I correct that on those disaster recovery funds, that the purpose for those funds was to assist people to repair their homes who basically didn't have insurance. Is that correct? Is that what the purpose was?
It was, the funds were both to allow communities to deal with public infrastructure which failed to function, to mitigate against future
Give me an
disasters.
example of public infrastructure that failed to function.
A water system or a sewer system. In the largest expenditure of funds in the infrastructure side, I believe, and Mr. Stone can correct me if I'm wrong, was for backup generators for water and wastewater facilities to allow them to continue to function when utilities were cut off.
So one of the purposes of the funds was to provide backup generators.
That was one of the principal expenditures of the state.
But the overall goal for the private citizen was to basically assist them in repairing their houses.
Yes, sir.
From damage.
Yes.
Was that the purpose? So how did your intervention help that process?
This is a complicated area, but let me summarize briefly. I know, and I would be happy to elaborate on it to any extent you would like. But first of all, immediately following Hurricane Ike, we raised a series of written concerns with the governor's office regarding the lessons that needed to be learned with Hurricane Rita. As you've heard, we're still extending Hurricane Rita recovery funds today, many years after that disaster. We suggested that the lessons be learned and that there be a standard set of guidelines, and that instead of having 500 different entities administering programs, there should be a consolidation of programs in order to move funds more rapidly. We testified at every public hearing. We filed numerous written information on that. The governor's office decided not to follow that direction, and instead to essentially award every eligible local jurisdiction to make it possible for them to apply through a COG, which would then go back to the state of Texas to apply for money to administer programs. The fracturing of the administration of those funds is the central problem with the slow speed of disaster recovery. The second area, to answer specifically the question that you asked, the second area was that at the time that we filed our administrative complaint, the state of Texas was proposing to allocate 27% of the disaster recovery funds for home repairs. Outside of the Houston-Galveston area. They were using a lot of money for home repairs in Houston-Galveston. But those other areas, Orange, Beaumont, Port Arthur, East Texas, the Rio Grande Valley proposed to do no home repairs with its money. To basically turn their backs completely on people who had lost their homes in the hurricane and said, instead, we're going to find public infrastructure programs to spend this on. We objected to that. As a result of the conciliation agreement, 55% of the funds will be spent on housing, and 55% of the funds will be spent on low and moderate income people, which was also an area of concern. Prior to our filing the complaint, it was our opinion, based on the tracking of the round one money, that less than 50% of the money was going to low and moderate income people, which would have put the state in violation of the federal requirement that 50% of the money was spent on low and moderate income people. A third area that we helped on.
That's enough. The problem I have sitting up here is that because of this argument over how to administer it and how to spend it, nothing got done. So do you think, in retrospect, there would have been a better way to approach this?
Yes, sir.
What would it have been?
In the numerous public hearings and testimony of us and others, we laid out a plan to learn the lessons from Rita and not repeat the Rita problem. We are repeating the Rita scenario and making it even worse. Now,
how can it be worse? I mean, we haven't spent any of the money.
No,
how can it be worse?
That's not correct, Mr. Chairman. There has been money spent. It has been arguably a de minimis amount, but it's been...
Okay, so we'll argue over whether any or de minimis is the question. But, I mean, the fact is nothing. I mean, I represent a lot of people who think that this is Exhibit A of what's wrong with the government. All it can do is spend money, but it does the average citizen no good. And it would seem to me like possibly, instead of arguing over the entire pot, you could have gone in there and argued over a percentage of the pot, because some of that money that the state was going to spend would have been going on things that you agreed with. But, you know, it's probably not fair to do this in 2 or 3 minutes, but this looks like a colossal failure to me.
Mr. Chairman, I have intimately watched these programs and been involved in them since Rita.
Yeah.
It's my opinion that the Dolly housing portion of the program is tracking to move at about the same pace or perhaps a little faster than Rita. So I don't believe that it's a complete train wreck. I do believe it's been slow. I will accept responsibility for about 4 months of delay on that, and I can walk you through how our administrative complaint encumbered the process for 4 months. However, I won't apologize for insisting that the state follow civil rights law.
I'm not asking you to apologize. Last question. If you could do one thing today to get the money going to the people who really need it, what would you do?
At this stage,
Yes, sir.
it is impossible to go back and restructure the program in a more efficient manner because too much time and too much investment has been made, and the HUD approvals are finally lining up in place. The one thing I would do at this moment is I would ask the governor of the state of Texas to send the analysis of impediments to fair housing into HUD for approval. It's been sitting on their desk for months and has not moved. That's holding round 2 funds. Understand that our conciliation agreement did not encumber in any manner round 1 funds. So $1.3 billion is sitting there, ready to be drawn down today. We didn't encumber that. We're talking about round 2 funds. The way to move round 2 funds further is to get the analysis of impediments to fair housing into HUD so it can be approved, and then there will be a clear roadmap to proceed. It will be slow slogging, however.
Thank you.